Hello, Plutonians, and welcome back to my channel. I literally just thought of this word today when I made a community post. I don't know how it's taken me almost a year to think of it. So we are all Plutonians here on this channel. Today's video is one that quite a few of you have highly requested and have been waiting for quite a while. I'm sorry it's taken a bit long, but I have been busy with relocating this last month. I have moved, by the way. I know it looks like I haven't, but it's just the same filming setup. And now I finally have time to sit down and record this. So as you can tell from the title, today's video is part one of looking into the 1993 allegations against Michael Jackson. So this video will be split into two. For today's video, part one will be about the chronology of events that led to the allegations and the settlement. And in part two, we will be examining and analyzing the settlement itself, of course, from a legal perspective. A couple of disclaimers before we start. First, as per usual on my channel, I will only be focusing on the material facts. Now, material facts are just the most important and relevant facts pertaining to a case. So I'm saying this to remind you all that I'm only human, and I know that Michael Jackson has a very intense fan base. So if I leave something out or if I miss out on something, everything that I'm relying on will be linked in the description box below. The second disclaimer is that I will be treating this case as though it is a case that I am preparing to take to trial, which means that any evidence that I cannot rely on in real life, I will not be relying on in this video or in any videos, because I do want to make this as realistic as possible when it comes to arguing the merits of Michael's case. This means that pretty much the entirety of Ray Chandler's book, All That Glitters, will not be referred to as any sort of reliable evidence in this case. This is because most of his book is hearsay. Now, in simple terms, hearsay is someone makes a statement outside of court, they say something, and then someone in court, usually the party or a witness, tries to introduce that statement as evidence that a fact in issue is true. So for example, Ray Chandler's book is full of assertions that Evan Chandler told him this and June Chandler told him that, and that is all hearsay, especially in Evan's case because he is no longer with us. He's dead. So to summarize, most of Ray Chandler's book is he told me this and she told me that, and then he put it in a book. That's not reliable. Now, there are exceptions to hearsay, of course. And a good example is the legal assistant of the lawyer that Evan Chandler retained to bring Michael Jackson down. His name is Barry Rothman, and his assistant at the time was Geraldine Hughes. And there are instances where she directly overheard something being said. So she directly perceived it herself. So for example, Ms. Hughes witnessed Barry Rothman and Evan Chandler having several secret meetings at Mr. Rothman's office, and sometimes she would overhear them. That's something she directly perceived and experienced firsthand. It's not like someone told her that Barry Rothman said this and this. She directly heard him say it. So our key players for this case are Michael Jackson, of course, Jordan Chandler, the minor in question at the time, his mother June, and his father Evan. To some extent, Barry Rothman, Evan's lawyer, and David Schwartz, who was June's husband at the time, also play a key role. So Michael first met the Chandlers in May of 1992 when his car broke down in LA. So he goes to a car rental that was owned by Jordan Chandler's stepfather, David Schwartz, and Schwartz offers Michael a deal. He would rent him a car for free if Michael promises to call Jordan, who was a big fan at the time. Michael accepts this deal and calls Jordan a couple of days later. He and the boy's family become friends after that. So here it's important to note that Michael did not seek Jordan out. He didn't initiate the relationship. And in fact, one could argue that had David Schwartz not made that deal, Michael would have gone home that day without ever having met Jordan, and his life would have taken a very different turn. So to begin with, Michael would call Jordan around once a month between May of 1992 and January of 1993. So that's around 8 times. By no means an excessive amount. During these phone calls, June, the mother, was always present. And then in February of 1993, June and Jordan go to Neverland for the very first time. Around March 1993, Jordan asks June if he can sleep in Michael's room with the rest of the kids. She declines, but she says that Jordan was insistent. Now, I want to point this out early on in the video because I know people tend to clock out before a video ends. Michael has always denied being in the same bed with the children at the same time. So he's always maintained, and there have been eyewitnesses that have seen the children sleep on the bed and Michael would sleep on the floor or on the couch or what have you. I can't even imagine how much furniture he would have in that extravagant bedroom of his. Between the end of March and April 1993, Michael invites the family to Las Vegas with him. And from then on, June and Jordan frequently visited Michael at his various homes and traveled with him, including to Monaco and Paris. And at this point, Michael hadn't met Evan yet. So it was just June and Jordan. And June was always there. The Chandlers claim that Jordan started sharing a bedroom with Michael from that Vegas trip, but they didn't allege any abuse early on. So clearly the friendship escalated, but it's very clear that the friendship was with the family, not just Jordan. And to an outsider, the way the media portrays this is that it was just Michael and Jordan the entire time. But by her own admission, in 2005, during the trial, June was always there. And she was very resistant to any notion of abuse that Evan brought up, as you'll find out later as we discuss it, until she changed her mind quite late in the process. Now, there are various types of mothers out there, and of course, one can argue that a mother would put the welfare of her child after monetary gain. So people might say June was just in on it because she wanted the privileges and the money and the lifestyle that came with basically selling off her son to Michael. But that's not necessarily true. That's an argument that can be put out there. Prior to even meeting Michael, Jordan lived with his mother. He had no connection to his father, Evan, and the two seemed quite close. One can assume that since she had custody of Jordan, she loved him and cared for him before Michael even came into the picture, as any normal mother would. So this argument of she didn't care about Jordan as long as she got the money is quite weak. Not to say it's not possible, but these things need to be looked at contextually. The nature of the relationship between the mother and the child is a huge factor in determining whether a mother would be willing to sacrifice her child's welfare for monetary gain. On the 20th of May of 1993, Michael meets Evan Chandler for the first time. After that, Michael and Evan invite each other to each other's homes, and Evan also invited Michael to stay for weekends at a time. Now, Evan was a dentist, and it's important to point out that he wasn't happy being a dentist. He actually wanted to be a screenwriter. In fact, I do believe he has a writing credit on a particular movie. I don't know what it is right now, but I will put it up on the screen if I find it. Needless to say, he wasn't successful. So he didn't get to that level of success and, I suppose, stardom in Hollywood that he was hoping for. So by all accounts, he was quite fame hungry and narcissistic and quite bitter about the fact that he was a dentist rather than a screenwriter in Hollywood. This is an important factor to bear in mind. So we're not just dealing with a normal person here. By the time he meets Michael, he already had such high aspirations for himself in the entertainment industry. In June of 1993, only a month after meeting Michael, Evan hires lawyer Barry Rothman, who was a patient of his. As I said, Evan was a dentist. Now, it is interesting to note that Rothman himself was previously disciplined by the bar for misconduct as a lawyer. On the 8th of July, 1993, Evan was taped talking to David Schwartz, June's second husband, about hiring Rothman. And in that phone call, he discussed his extortion plan. David Schwartz recorded this for Michael's private investigator, Anthony Pelicano, and he gave the recording to him the very next day, so July 9th.
This man is going to be humiliated beyond belief. He will not believe it. He will not believe what's going to happen to him. Beyond his worst nightmares. Sell one more record. This attorney I found, I interviewed several, and I picked the nastiest son of a bitch I could find. Once I make that phone call, this guy is just going to destroy everybody in sight. Any devious, nasty, cruel way that he can do it. And I've given him full authority to do that. It'll be a massacre if I don't get what I want. If I go through with this, I win big time. I will get everything I want, and they will be destroyed forever. They will be destroyed. June is going to lose Jordy. She will have no right to ever see him again. Yeah. That's a fact, Dave. That's what's going to happen. Michael's career will be over. Does that help Jordy? Michael's career will be over. And does that help Jordy? That's irrelevant to me.
Soon after, Jordan was sent to Evan for a visitation, but Evan refused to give Jordan back to his mother, June, after the week passed. Now, this is the week that the allegations first started to materialize. It's unclear how they surfaced, because all we know is what was said in All That Glitters, Ray Chandler's book, which I will not be relying on as a credible and reliable source of evidence. All we need to know is that this is the week after the phone call in which Evan discussed the extortion plan with David. This is the week that the allegations surfaced. On the 14th of July of 1993, Evan Chandler and Rothman contact psychiatrist Dr. Mathis Abrams and discuss a hypothetical child molestation situation. So here we have Evan making up a story, a hypothetical situation, to a psychiatrist and asking him to give his written expert opinion completely based on this hypothetical situation. So it's not like he told him his suspicions regarding Michael and Jordan. It was absolutely hypothetical. Evan Chandler later used this letter as a negotiation tool with June and Michael. Evan later arranges a meeting with Michael and Anthony Pelicano to take place on the 4th of August in 1993. This was followed up by a meeting between Evan, Rothman, and Anthony Pelicano in Rothman's office, where Evan demanded $20 million from Michael in exchange for not turning to the authorities and going public with his allegations of abuse. In other words, his extortion plan was coming to fruition. So during all of this, Jordan was still with his father. He was only meant to stay with him for a week, and I believe he ended up staying with him for a month. On the 16th of August, 1993, a court orders Evan to return Jordan to his mother. And now get this. In Evan's motion against that court order, he doesn't make a single allegation against Michael. You would think that if a father who was concerned about the welfare of his son, especially in the custody of a mother who would allow such things to happen to her son, you would think he would mention that in his arguments against that motion. Your Honor, I can't return my child to his mother because she has allowed Michael Jackson to molest him. He's not safe with her. He has to stay with me. None of that was ever done. In fact, Michael Jackson was not mentioned in any capacity in Evan's motion. Now, on the 17th of August of 1993, instead of returning Jordan to his mother as the court ordered, he takes him to a psychiatrist where Jordan makes his allegations for the very first time. This interview with the psychiatrist triggers a criminal investigation against Michael. And at this point, June sides with Jordan because to her, if her son is saying it, then it must be true. So she fought any insinuations from Evan that something untoward was going on. But when it started to come out of her son, that's when she started to think, what if it's true? Now, when the criminal investigations started, Michael was actually overseas on his Dangerous tour. On August 21st, 22nd, and the 30th, 1993, while Michael was overseas, search warrants were executed on his properties, including Neverland Ranch and a hotel room at the Mirage Hotel in Las Vegas, where he used to stay with the Chandlers, and no incriminating evidence was found whatsoever. Now, again, everything I mentioned here, I mentioned for a reason. Michael was overseas, and he had no idea that a criminal investigation would start. And so he wouldn't even have had any notice or time to hide anything, to clear his properties of any incriminating evidence. So the fact that they couldn't find anything when he was away and had no notice is a very strong indicator of his innocence. Usually people need a heads up, and even then that's not enough, because honestly, criminals are almost always caught. There's always a trail, especially with computers and whatnot. In late August, Michael files an extortion claim against Evan. And at that point, Rothman quits. But according to Rothman's legal assistant, Miss Hughes, he apparently continues to advise Evan behind the scenes. On the 30th of August of 1993, Mr. Pelicano, Michael's PI, releases parts of the secretly taped conversation between Evan and David Schwartz. The Chandlers then hire lawyer Gloria Allred, who is a criminal attorney, only to quickly replace her with a civil attorney by the name of Larry Feldman. And I point this out to highlight how money was at the forefront of the Chandlers' mind, because they preferred a civil attorney over a criminal one. If your child was actually molested by a grown man, you would think that your priorities would be to see that criminal face justice rather than get your hands on his money. On the 14th of September 1993, Feldman files a $30 million civil lawsuit against Michael for sexual battery, seduction, willful misconduct, intentional infliction of emotional distress, fraud, and negligence. Now, this was filed despite the fact that the criminal investigation at this point was going nowhere. They couldn't find anything to incriminate Michael. On the 6th of October 1993, Jordan is taken to a psychiatrist, Dr. Richard Gardner, who conducts an interview with him. This interview was leaked to the public in February 2003, which is around the time the Martin Bashir documentary that basically annihilated Michael was released. And this interview is the most detailed account that we have of Jordan's allegations. It is linked down below. It's very long, but if you're interested and you have time, by all means. On the 28th of October 1993, the police interviewed between 40 to 60 children, and according to some sources, it could have been up to 100 children who had ever spent time with Michael at Neverland. No one corroborated the accuser's story. All of the children said nothing inappropriate or suspicious had ever been done to them by Michael. Now, in anticipation of arguments that these were children and they wouldn't even have known if something happened to them, the ages varied. Let's not forget Jordan himself was a teenager at the time, and I was once a teenager not that long ago. I'm sure a lot of you were also teenagers at some point in your lives if you're not currently teenagers, and you can remember that if you're 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, you know when something wrong is happening. We aren't talking about toddlers here. In fact, Michael didn't really invite toddlers to Neverland. There were always children that were old enough to run around and play around and understand what was going on, and also understand who Michael Jackson was. So the fact that not a single one of these children, potentially mostly teenagers, didn't have anything to say that would be incriminating is once again an indicator of Michael's innocence. Now, in November 1993, Michael went to Europe. Some people speculate it was London, to seek treatment for a painkiller addiction. Now, unfortunately, Michael has been known to suffer from this addiction for most of his adult life. On the 16th of November of 1993, Feldman, the Chandler's lawyer, files a motion for trial preference, which is a special request to have the civil trial heard within 120 days after the motion is granted. And this is specifically used in cases where the victim is a child under the age of 14, and at the time, Jordan was 13. So this is an indicator that the Chandlers really wanted the civil trial to go ahead before the criminal one. So again, an indicator of what's on the forefront of their mind? Money. I'll tell you what, I'm not a parent. I don't ever plan on being one. But if I had a child who I believe wholeheartedly was molested, money would be the last thing on my mind. All I would care about is making sure the case goes to trial and the criminal, the culprit, is put away for the rest of their lives. I'd imagine any normal parent who loves their child would feel the same way. And it is important to note that Evan didn't even have a close relationship with Jordan. By all accounts, they basically never saw each other and never spoke until Evan met Michael. And suddenly, Evan had some kind of an interest in Jordan and started to act all jealous, like Michael was coming in between them and damaging the father-son relationship that they enjoyed and cherished before Michael's arrival. As you'll remember, it was always June and Jordan for an entire year until Michael eventually met Evan. And Evan was never in the picture. So in terms of Evan, at least, we definitely don't see the typical loving parent who genuinely cares for the well-being of their child. This is a parent who is using their child as a pawn to further himself in his own career and his ambitions. Now, Michael's team was obviously hard at work as well. On the 22nd of November, 1993, the judge denied Michael's team's argument to stay the civil trial, which means postpone it, delay it, in order to permit the criminal trial to run first. So as I said, this was denied and the civil trial was set for the 21st of March, 1994. Now you might be wondering, what is the big deal here? Why are they fighting so hard to get the civil trial to go ahead before the criminal trial? And why was Michael fighting so hard to get the criminal trial to go ahead first? The answer is simple. Allowing a civil trial to go first would have significantly impacted Michael's right to a fair trial. A civil trial means all of the evidence would be laid out and the criminal prosecutors would have access to that evidence. So they would have a preemptive strike, really, against Michael. They could use everything coming out of that civil trial in their favor and prepare ahead to address any weaknesses or gaps in their case. They would have known exactly what his defense is, and they would have countered it before it even got to trial. Now, it's also worth pointing out that past employees, or even 5 bodyguards actually, who never even worked for Michael, they worked for the family, but not Michael himself, came out and said, oh, the allegations are true, when they never raised any suspicions beforehand. And they said that they were fired because they knew too much. So these 5 bodyguards sued Michael for $10 million for basically unfair dismissal. It turns out that there was a $100,000 deal that was struck between these bodyguards and a talk show that wanted to host them in order for them to tell their story. Now, they've never reported anything to the authorities, even after coming out with their allegations. In fact, in the depositions that they gave to the police, they stated that they never saw anything inappropriate take place. And eventually, in 1995, their lawsuit was thrown out. Now, around late 1993, Michael returned to the US. On the 20th of December 1993, Michael was strip searched and photographed naked. Two days later, on the 22nd of December, Michael released his famous statement, absolutely denying all of the allegations.
I wish to convey my deepest gratitude for your love and support. I am doing well and I am strong. As you may already know, after my tour ended, I remain out of the country undergoing treatment for a dependency on pain medication. This medication was initially prescribed to see the excruciating pain that I was suffering after recent reconstructive surgery on my scalp. There have been many disgusting statements made recently concerning allegations of improper conduct on my part. These statements about me are totally false. As I have maintained from the very beginning, I am hoping for a speedy end to this horrifying experience to which I have been subjected. I shall not in this statement respond to all of the false allegations being made against me, since my lawyers have advised me that this is not the proper forum in which to do that. I will say that I am particularly upset by the handling of this mass matter by the incredible, terrible mass media. At every opportunity, the media has dissected and manipulated these allegations to reach their own conclusions. I ask all of you to wait and hear the truth before you label or condemn me. Don't treat me like a criminal, because I am innocent. I have been forced to submit to a dehumanizing and humiliating examination by the Santa Barbara County Sheriff Department and the Los Angeles Police Department earlier this week. They served a search warrant on me which allowed them to view and photograph my body, including my penis, my buttocks, my lower torso, thighs, and any other area that they wanted. They were supposedly looking for any discoloration, spotting, blotches, or other evidence of a skin color disorder called vitiligo, which I have previously spoken about. The warrant also directed me to cooperate in any examination of my body by their physician to determine the condition of my skin, including whether I have vitiligo or any other skin disorder. The warrant further stated that I had no right to refuse the examination or photographs, and if I failed to cooperate with them, they would introduce that refusal at any trial as an indication of my guilt. It was the most humiliating ordeal of my life, one that no person should ever have to suffer. And even after experiencing the indignity of this search, the parties involved were still not satisfied and wanted to take even more pictures. It was a nightmare, a horrifying nightmare. But if this is what I have to endure to prove my innocence, my complete innocence, so be it. Throughout my life, I have only tried to help thousands upon thousands of children to live happy lives. It brings tears to my eyes when I see any child who suffers. I am not guilty of these allegations, but if I am guilty of anything, it is of giving all that I have to give to help children all over the world. It is of loving children of all ages and races. It is of gaining sheer joy from seeing children with their innocent and smiling faces. It is of enjoying through them the childhood that I missed myself. If I am guilty of anything, it is of believing what God said about children. Suffer little children to come unto me, and forbid them not, for such is the kingdom of heaven. In no way do I think that I am God, but I do try to be God-like in my heart. I am totally innocent of any wrongdoing, and I know these terrible allegations will all be proven false. Again, to my friends and fans, thank you very much for all of your support. Together, we will see this through to the very end. I love you very much, and may God bless you all. I love you. Goodbye.
I have to say that every time I watch that statement, it is so clear to me on a human level, on an instinctive body language level, that this man was absolutely devastated by these allegations. And this statement is a reason for my belief that he's innocent. Just one reason, of course. Lawyers, police officers, detectives, we do rely on our instincts as well. Of course, it's not purely what we rely on, but we are driven by them, especially if you have good ones, good instincts, that is. Because let's face it, there are people out there that have absolutely no instincts and they get themselves into the stupidest situations ever. Unfortunately, these people are usually naive and gullible and nice, and Michael was one of them. I know a few in my life that I love and care for. They're so naive, and I have to take care of them and look out for them and be their shield, because they just get themselves into awful situations where they put themselves in harm's way. So back to the point, a huge part of a police officer's job, or a detective, when interviewing a victim or a suspect even, is to go off their instincts, assess their body language. It's something that you really can't help doing as a human being, but then trained professionals such as detectives are even better at doing it. For me as well, I'm not a trained body language analyst, but when I talk to people who have a complaint, I do find myself reading their body language. The jury, as I said in a recent video pertaining to Johnny Depp and the live testimony in Virginia, a major component of a jury's role is to assess the body language of every single witness and party to the case when they're testifying, and to some extent they'd even look over and examine, for example, the defendant while they're sitting there in court. A lot of jurors will tell you that they get this gut feeling that a person is being truthful or deceitful. So all this to say, his body language, his voice, his tone, everything in that video speaks to me on a human level that he is absolutely innocent. He's emotional in the video, and that's another indicator that someone is being honest. When we start feeling empathy and we start feeling their pain, or even their happiness, their joy, whatever it is, genuine emotion is contagious. There are many instances when people sit there feigning remorse and feigning guilt and saying they're sorry, but you just don't buy it, or even crocodile tears. And it doesn't move you because it's not real. And we can tell as intelligent animals instinctively that it's not real. All right, now after this statement was released on the 28th of December, 1993, Jordan Chandler makes his first declaration with the authorities. A declaration is a statement. A witness goes in to make a formal statement of their account. On the 14th of January, 1994, the judge postpones Michael's deposition, which was initially scheduled for the 18th of January, and it was then moved to take place sometime between the 25th of January to the 1st of February. Now, feeling immensely under pressure, because if Michael gives his deposition, then that's going to kickstart the prosecution's access to his defense, basically. And as I said, that would significantly impact his right to a fair trial. So at this point, Michael's very pressured, and his lawyers, most likely, advise him to settle. A settlement is agreed to be signed on January 25th, and the extortion charges that Michael had filed against Evan Chandler were dropped as per the conditions of the settlement. Now, we will be discussing the settlement in detail in part 2 of this video. I have a few more things in the timeline before I conclude this one. So between February and April of 1994, the grand jury hearings in Santa Barbara and Los Angeles were held pertaining to Michael's investigation. And this is the criminal investigation. Both grand juries disbanded without indicting Michael. This means that the grand jury was not convinced that there was enough to indict him. Despite this fact, which is very important. Now, normally, this is where it all ends. But despite this, the authorities still insist on proceeding with the investigation and really try to get Jordan Chandler to testify against Michael. But Jordan refuses repeatedly, and he has never agreed to this very day. And of course, this includes the 2005 trial. Jordan refused to involve himself. All right, that's it for the timeline. As I said, there may have been things I glossed over. That's fine. It's not the end of the world. Everything is linked. I'm not trying to mislead anyone. So please, by all means, if you have the time to read through everything in detail, all the resources are available in the description box. Next, we will be looking at the settlement itself. We will be dissecting it, and hopefully I'll be able to explain certain things and to clear up some very common misconceptions pertaining to civil settlements. I hope you all found this video informative. And again, I'd like to say that I am not biased. I am simply approaching this case with an open mind, and after assessing all of the facts and the available evidence, I have arrived at the conclusion that Michael is innocent. Many may disagree, and it is your prerogative to do so. The issue here is I'm not a trained psychologist or any sort of mental health expert to comment on Michael's psychology. But I have heard many mental health experts talk about how Michael is basically a 10-year-old in an adult's body, which would explain a lot of his peculiar behavior. I will reserve more of my opinions on this at the end of part 2 because that will be the close of this entire topic. Of course, we'll also be looking at the 2005 trial, but that will probably be a very lengthy project for me to take on because it is very long and drawn out and detailed. But that doesn't mean it's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen very soon. I'm going to try my best to film and release part 2 in a timely manner after part 1. I am still settling down in my new apartment, and I've been working throughout the week, so some things are still in boxes and whatnot. So I'm not exactly free to divert all of my attention to making part 2. But it's not like it's going to be an entire month until you get part 2. I will aim for it to be the very next video that I release after this one. probably within a week or so. Please feel free to share this video on Twitter or any social media platform that you choose. It will help spread the word. So just because I'm not on Twitter anymore, I always used to share all of my videos on Twitter, and it would really get a wide reach because of that. So I would really appreciate it if you would share it on my behalf. The reason I left Twitter is because it was getting too much for me, too much for my mental health, and I had to get out of it. I never used it before I started YouTube, so it's not something I'm particularly used to, and it's definitely not my social media platform of choice. That doesn't mean I'll never come back in the future, but for now I really had to take a step back. As always, don't forget to let me know what you think. Thank you so much for watching. A very special and warm thank you to my patrons. Stay safe, everyone, and I'll catch you in a future video.